He walked outside to take a call. What he saw made him stop cold. His 4 sons, soaked with water, and the maid, the one he barely remembered hiring, laughing, holding the hose. He wasn't sure what hit him first: the joy, the chaos, or the confrontation that rose in his chest, because no one was allowed to touch his sons like that. Not in his house, not like this. And yet, they were smiling, and for the first time in 4 years, they looked free. Robert Thompson had built everything: a billion-dollar company, a name people respected, a house big enough to hold anything, except peace. He lost his wife 4 years ago, complications after the birth. One moment they were taking photos in the hospital, the next he was standing alone with 4 newborns and no answers. Since then, it had been a blur. Nannies came and went. Some lasted 3 days, some cried in the kitchen, some quit before dinner. The boys Oliver, Theodore, James and Henry were not cruel, just lost, loud, unpredictable, and hurting in ways they couldn't explain. Robert tried. He really did. But grief makes even love hard to reach. The house felt heavy, quiet, not the peaceful kind, the kind where laughter used to live and left. And then, one day, Christina showed up. She didn't come with a glowing resume, no degrees, no training. She came to clean bathrooms. That was all. But what Robert saw in that backyard wasn't cleaning. It was something else entirely. It made him angry. It made him confused. It made him remember. Because for 4 years, his sons hadn't laughed like that. And the worst part? They weren't looking for him. They were looking at her. Before we go any deeper, if you've ever carried pain so heavy you forgot what joy sounds like, if you've ever been afraid to love again, or felt like healing might come from the last person you expected, click subscribe, like this video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because sometimes God doesn't send a miracle with lightning and thunder. Sometimes He sends it holding a garden hose with a heart full of love. "No maid lasts a week in this house," the guard said quietly as the gates opened with a soft hum. He didn't look at her when he said it, just stared straight ahead, like he'd watched too many come and go to care anymore. Christina didn't answer. She sat in the back seat of the electric car, hands folded over a faded manila folder that held the only proof she'd ever worked at all. No degrees, no certifications, just quiet jobs done right and no complaints. She looked out the window as they drove up the long driveway. The house rose like a promise: clean lines, big windows, sharp edges. Everything about it looked perfect. But the moment she stepped out, she could feel it. That kind of silence you don't just hear, you feel it in your chest. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that grows when something's missing. Mrs. Alder met her at the door, tall, crisp, controlled. She didn't offer a smile, just a quick nod. "You're here to clean, nothing else. Don't get involved with the children." Christina nodded. She wasn't here to make trouble. She needed the job. Her father's treatments weren't going to pay for themselves, and rent back in Atlanta was already 2 weeks late. The house was spotless, floors polished, air still. But no photos, no color, no toys, no fingerprints. As they walked through the hall, distant sounds echoed from upstairs: little feet running, something slamming, a sharp laugh that turned into a cry. "Those are the boys," Mrs. Alder said stiffly. 4 of them, same age, wild if you ask me. Their mother passed not long after they were born. Christina paused, but only for a second. She knew that sound. That kind of noise didn't come from mischief. It came from kids who hadn't been held enough. Her first job was the guest bathroom. She scrubbed in silence, letting her hands work while her mind drifted. She thought of home, of her father's tired eyes, of late nights folding laundry with the lights off to save electricity, of promises she'd made to stay steady, no matter how hard things got. Around noon, she moved to the hallway near the playroom. That's when she saw them. 4 little boys, all with the same shade of brown hair, faces too small to carry so much sadness. One was hiding behind a couch cushion, holding a crayon like a weapon. Another was on the floor, legs kicking as he screamed about a broken toy. The other 2 sat by the window, quiet, like they didn't know what to do. They didn't see her at first, until one of them looked up Oliver. She'd learn his name later. He just stared. Not curious, not scared. Just wondering, like he didn't quite believe she was real. Christina didn't wave, didn't smile. She just gave a small nod, a soft, human gesture, then went back to cleaning. But something had shifted. Later that day, she passed the backyard. It was still, green, too perfect. A swing sat untouched. A little plastic tub for toys was flipped over. The hose coiled neatly like no one had ever used it. Christina stood at the glass door for a moment. She didn't know why, but she felt her chest ache. A place like this should have had footprints in the dirt, water on the pavement, someone yelling for 5 more minutes before dinner. Instead, it was just quiet. Inside, she heard someone shouting again. Another crash, another cry. She closed her eyes for a second. Just one breath. She didn't come to raise anyone's children. She came to scrub floors. But something told her that wasn't all she'd be doing here. Not in this house. Not with those boys. Not after what she saw in their eyes. The next morning came quiet and grey. Rain touched the windows like it was trying to whisper something. Soft, steady. The kind of weather that made people stay in bed longer than they should. Christina didn't sleep in. She was up before the house stirred, tying her apron in the kitchen, steam rising from the kettle. Mrs. Alder walked in just as the tea was done, holding her clipboard like it was a weapon. Bathrooms first, then the baseboards in the east wing. Boys will be having breakfast soon, stay out of the dining area. Christina nodded without looking up. Yes, ma'am. She poured herself a cup, then one for Mrs. Alder. The older woman hesitated, then took it with a nod that almost looked like thanks. Almost. That morning's routine was quiet, cleaner than usual. Maybe the storm outside made the boys tired, or maybe the weight in the house had just settled deeper. As Christina dusted the hallway near the staircase, she heard them. Not screaming this time, just little voices, whispering, fussing, the clink of spoons on plates, one of them singing a tune without words. Something about that sound stopped her. She didn't go to the dining room. She just stood still, letting it wash over her. It wasn't peaceful, but it was human. By noon, she'd made it to the upstairs guest bedroom. She worked slower this time, not out of laziness, but because something in her didn't want to rush, like her hands needed to match the pace of the house's grief. When she stepped into the hallway again, she saw them. All 4 boys, huddled around a tablet on the floor. The device wasn't even on, they were just pressing buttons, arguing, pointing. One of them, James, kept banging it against the carpet, frustrated. They didn't notice her. So she kept walking. But before she reached the stairs, a small voice called out behind her. Hey. She turned. It was Oliver again. Standing now, holding a toy truck by its wheel, his hair messy, one sock off. Christina froze, not afraid, just unsure if she was allowed to answer. He walked closer, the truck dragging behind him. What's your name? He asked. Before she could speak, a sharp voice cut through the hall. Oliver, come back inside. Mrs. Alder. Her shoes tapped quick and hard on the floor. Miss Walsh, she said firmly, looking past the boy. I thought you were told not to engage. Christina lowered her gaze. He spoke to me first, ma'am. That doesn't matter. You're here to clean, not connect. Oliver turned and walked away without a word. Christina stood there a moment longer, her hands clenched around the cleaning cloth. She wasn't trying to connect. But when a child looks you in the eye, you can't help but see what's missing. She went back to work. That night, long after the boys had gone quiet, Christina found herself in the laundry room, folding towels fresh from the dryer. Her hands moved slowly, gentle, like each cloth held something more than cotton. She didn't hear him come in. I didn't expect you to still be working, said a voice behind her. She turned. It was him, Robert Thompson, in a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, no suit, no phone in his hand. He looked tired, but not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. She stood a little straighter. Just finishing up, sir. He nodded, watching her hands. Mrs. Alder told me about the hallway. Christina stayed quiet. He walked closer, picking up a folded towel, turning it over like he needed something to do with his hands. They don't talk to most people. I wasn't trying to make them. Still, he said, almost to himself, he spoke to you. Silence settled between them, not awkward, just full. How long have you been here? He asked. 2 days. Feels longer. She nodded. He looked down, then back at her. I don't know what they need anymore. His voice cracked just slightly on the word need. But something tells me. He stopped himself. She waited, but he didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he gave her a quiet nod and left the room. And for the first time since she arrived, Christina felt seen. The day started like any other. Quiet tension in the hallways, rain in the forecast. Mrs. Alder's voice clipped and sharp. By mid-morning, the sun pushed through the clouds, unexpected. The kind of light that makes things look softer than they are. But nothing inside the house had changed. The boys were restless. One had drawn on the walls with a marker. Another had dumped cereal down the laundry chute. Mrs. Alder was yelling again. One of the twins started crying so hard, his nose bled. Christina had just finished wiping down the windows when she saw it happening. The twins were in the backyard, barefoot, pulling at each other's shirts. A toy truck lay broken between them. She stepped outside before thinking. The door clicked shut behind her. The air was warm, damp from the earlier rain. She didn't say anything at first, just picked up the toy, then walked over to the hose. She didn't even know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was something deeper. She turned the hose on, let the water run through her fingers. Then she grabbed the green plastic bin from the corner of the yard, the one filled with forgotten balls and cracked water guns. She dumped it out, flipped it over, and started filling it with water. The boys stopped fighting. One by one, the others came to see. She didn't ask them to come. She didn't coax them. She just smiled, soft and small, and splashed the surface with her hand. It took less than a minute. All 4 of them stepped into that tub, clothes and all, tiny knees pressed together, socks soaking, laughter building like something long buried, was finally finding its way out. She picked up the hose, pointed it gently, sprayed a fine stream of water into the sky, and they screamed with joy. Real joy. Not wild or destructive or forced, but the kind that lives in children who, for a moment, forget everything they've lost. She laughed too, not loudly, but freely. And maybe, for the first time in years, that backyard remembered what it was like to hold life again. She didn't hear the sliding door open, didn't know he was watching. Robert stepped outside mid-call, phone still in his hand, words still on his tongue. And then he saw it. His 4 boys, in the plastic tub, laughing, shouting, reaching up toward the sky as water fell like rain, and the maid barefoot in the grass standing with the hose, her face turned toward the light. He froze. Not from anger. Not entirely. It was something else. Shock. Confusion. A tightening in his chest he hadn't felt in years, because what he saw looked nothing like what this house had become. It looked like hope, but it also looked like chaos, and that conflict between what he feared and what he needed stopped him in his tracks. She didn't notice him at first, but when she did, her face changed. She pulled the hose away. The boys groaned, still laughing, still splashing, not yet seeing the shift in her. Robert said nothing, just stared at her, like he didn't know whether to say thank you or how dare you. She stepped back, dropped the hose. I'm sorry, she said quickly, voice low. They were upset, I thought. I was just trying to calm them. Robert looked at his sons, soaked, barefoot, smiling. Then, back at her. Something in him was cracking. He felt it. And it scared him. You think this is normal? He asked, his voice too even to be calm. Christina swallowed. No, sir. I think it's human. He didn't respond. Just stood there, wet grass underfoot, the sun warming a house that hadn't felt warmth in a long time. The boys didn't stop laughing. One of them looked up at him, cheeks red, eyes shining. Daddy, look, we're swimming. And something broke open. Not loudly, just enough to shake the silence inside him. That evening, the house felt different. Not louder, not busier. Just different. The boys had gone down early, for once without a fight. No tears, no yelling. They were asleep before the sky turned fully dark, their hair still damp, their clothes swapped for pajamas that hadn't been worn in months. Even the walls seemed quieter. Robert stood at the edge of the hallway, hand resting on the doorframe of their shared room. He watched them for a while, 4 small bodies tucked beneath the covers, curled in strange little shapes, arms flung across each other like they didn't know where one ended and the other began. It didn't make sense. He had tried everything. Therapists, behavioral experts, books on trauma and single parenting. He'd paid for nannies who spoke 4 languages and had degrees in childhood development. But they never laughed for them. And they never slept like this. Not until today. He stepped away, slowly, mind thick with questions he couldn't name. In the laundry room, Christina was folding towels again, same quiet rhythm, same calm face. Her back turned to the door. She didn't flinch when he entered. He didn't speak right away. The soft hum of the dryer was the only sound between them. "You used the garden hose." It wasn't an accusation, but it wasn't kind, either. Christina didn't turn around. "Yes, sir. That wasn't in your job description." "No, sir." He waited, almost expecting more. But she didn't defend herself. She didn't explain. She just kept folding. He stepped closer. "Why?" Her hands slowed. She turned slightly, her voice steady. "They were crying. I just wanted to make them laugh." He looked at her for a long time, not at what she was doing, but at her face, the way her eyes didn't shift or drop, the way she looked at him, not with fear, but with quiet honesty. It unnerved him. "You're not a nanny." "No, sir." "You came here to clean." "Yes." "Then why do they trust you?" That time, she paused. Her hands rested on the folded towel. Her fingers gripped the edge, not tightly, but enough to say this part matters. "Because I don't try to fix them." The words landed like a whisper in a church. "I listen. I see them." She didn't say it proudly. It wasn't a declaration. It was just true. Robert didn't know what to do with that truth. So, he looked away. His voice softened, just a little. "Are you a mother?" "No." "Do you have family?" "My father, back in Atlanta. He's sick." "So why are you here?" She looked at him for the first time, really looked. Not at the man with money, or the suit, or the tired posture of someone who has too many people pretending to understand him. She saw the grief behind his eyes, the part of him that hadn't sat down since the funeral. The father who didn't know how to be both dad and mom, provider and protector, present and still holding it all together. And quietly, she said, "Because I know what it feels like to be left behind." He said nothing, but his shoulders dropped, just slightly, as if the weight he was carrying finally had a name. He looked down at the towels she had folded, the neat little stacks, the scent of fresh linen, the kind of normal he hadn't felt in years. He didn't thank her, didn't apologize, either. But he nodded, once, like a door had opened, just enough for light to pass through. Then he left, and she kept folding. The silence between them that night wasn't cold. It was full, not with answers, but with something else neither of them wanted to name just yet. It was Saturday morning when the new nanny arrived. Sharp pressed blouse, clipboard in hand, bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She had been flown in from a high-end agency in San Francisco, a PhD in child psychology, 2 best-selling books on discipline through cognitive redirection. Her resume was flawless. Robert met her at the door with polite formality. "The boys are spirited," he warned. She gave a confident laugh. "I've worked with worse." Christina watched from the kitchen as the woman made her way upstairs, heels clicking against the floor like she had something to prove. The house manager, Mrs. Alder, followed close behind. "Let's see how long she lasts," she muttered under her breath. "Maybe we'll finally have some order." Christina didn't respond. She was chopping strawberries, her apron dusted with flour. Soft music played from her phone. A small bowl of peeled oranges sat beside her, the way the boys liked them. It only took 15 minutes. The shouting started low, then higher. A thud, something glass breaking. A voice screaming, not a child's. "Stop it!" I said, "Stop!" Christina froze, the knife still in her hand. From upstairs came the sound of running feet. One of the boys was crying, another was yelling. Then all four voices tumbled into one loud mess, wild, high-pitched, scared. Robert was already halfway up the stairs. When he paused, the sight stopped him. Under the long hallway table, four little boys huddled. One was curled up, one had his hands over his ears, one clutched a stuffed giraffe like it was all he had in the world. And standing in the middle of it all, the new nanny, red-faced and flustered, holding a parenting manual like a shield. "They won't listen," she said sharply. "They're impossible. One of them bit me." Robert stepped forward. "They're just scared." The nanny shook her head. "No, this isn't fear. This is dysfunction." And then from the bottom of the stairs came a voice, soft, even. "Boys." Christina. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't run. Just stood at the bottom of the staircase, a dish towel in her hand, her eyes calm and open. One by one, the boys peeked out. Their faces shifted, panic fading into recognition, and then, as if pulled by something invisible, they moved. Down the stairs, toward her. Little feet on wooden steps. Not rushed, just sure. No screaming, no fighting. They walked right past the nanny, straight to Christina. One hugged her leg, another clung to her apron. The youngest stood behind her, peeking out like he'd found cover from a storm. The nanny blinked, stunned. What just happened?" No one answered. Robert just watched. And something in him turned. Not with noise, not with force, but with clarity. He looked at the nanny, still holding her clipboard like a safety blanket, and then back at the four boys, now quiet, now safe. He stepped aside. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. "We won't be needing your services." The nanny opened her mouth, but he was already turning away. Mrs. Older said nothing, just folded her arms, lips pressed thin. That afternoon, the house stayed still for the first time in days. Christina made the boys grilled cheese and apple slices. They sat around the kitchen island, giggling between bites. One told a joke that made no sense. The others laughed anyway. And Robert stood in the doorway, watching it all unfold like a man remembering something he thought he'd forgotten. He didn't say anything. But Christina looked up, and their eyes met. No words. Just something true hanging between them. Not fear, not gratitude. Just recognition. They only listened to her. And it wasn't because she knew the rules. It was because she saw them. The next day felt warmer. Not because of the weather. The sky was still overcast, the air cool and damp, but something in the house had shifted. There was a hum now. Low, soft, almost musical. Robert heard it first from the hallway, not a sound he was used to hearing in his home. He followed it, slow and quiet, until he reached the kitchen. And there they were. Christina and the boys. Not cleaning, not calming a tantrum. Just baking cookies. Flour dusted the counters, crumbs scattered across the floor. The twins were arguing over who got to crack the next egg, while one sat on the counter giggling at nothing in particular. Christina stood in the middle of it all, sleeves rolled, her face calm, her voice low. "If you drop that bowl, I'm not cleaning it up." The boy froze mid-motion, grinned, and set it down carefully. Robert stood at the doorway, unnoticed, watching. He hadn't seen this kind of chaos in years. Not since Lily. She used to sing in the kitchen like this, off-key and playful, balancing a baby on her hip while pulling banana bread from the oven. He took a breath. And for a second, it almost felt like she was here. "Do you want to try one?" one of the boys asked suddenly, eyes wide as he held up a warm cookie with both hands. It wasn't directed at him. It was for Christina. She leaned down, eyes soft. "Only if I get the burnt one." They laughed. Not because the joke was funny, but because it was safe. She turned and saw him. "Sorry, sir. We made a mess." "No," Robert said quietly. "You made noise." Christina gave a small nod, then turned back to the counter. The boys kept laughing. One was now licking the spoon. Another had cookie dough on his cheek. "Wash your hands before dinner," she said gently. And they listened. No argument, no pushing back. Just quiet obedience, not out of fear, but trust. Dinner was later than usual. But when the food was ready, the boys didn't run to the living room or hide behind chairs. They stayed near Christina, pulling at her apron strings. "Can she eat with us?" one of them asked, voice barely above a whisper. The room went still. Robert looked up from his seat at the head of the long table. Christina froze, unsure if she should answer. Mrs. Alder, who was carrying a tray of water glasses, stopped mid-step. Robert didn't respond right away. Then he pushed the chair next to him back slightly. "Sit." Just one word. But it felt like a door opening. Christina moved slowly, like she wasn't sure it was real. She removed her apron, set it on the counter, and took the seat beside the boys. No one spoke for a moment. Then, small hands reached for hers under the table. They ate together. The food was simple: soup, bread, fruit. But it felt holy. And then, just as the last bite was taken, it broke. Not a plate. Not a rule. Something deeper. One of the boys turned to Christina, his eyes wide and tired. "Do mums come back?" The room stopped breathing. Robert's hand, halfway to his glass, paused. Christina looked down, her lips parted slightly. And Robert saw it then, that she was not just someone who made them feel safe. She was someone they believed. And that belief was dangerous. It was a fragile, powerful thing he hadn't planned for. Because if they trusted her too much, if they loved her too much, what would happen when she left? What if she couldn't stay? What if they lost her too? He stood up suddenly. "Dinner's over. Time for bed." His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut the moment in half. The boys flinched. Christina stood, confused but silent, gathering plates without meeting his eyes. Robert walked out of the room, his jaw clenched. Not because he was angry at her, but because something inside him had started to open, and that terrified him. The house was quiet again, but not the kind of quiet Christina had brought. This was the old kind, the cold, heavy kind, the kind that crept into the corners and clung to the walls like it belonged there. Dinner had ended in silence. The boys were confused, tired. One had cried without words while putting on his pajamas. Another just curled up under the covers and stared at the ceiling. Christina didn't try to fix it. She just stood at the doorway of their room for a moment, watching, noticing how different silence felt when it came from fear. She turned out the light. Down the hall, Robert stood in his office, the door half open. The glow from his screen lit the room, but he wasn't typing. He wasn't reading either. Just sitting at the edge of the desk, holding a glass of untouched water, staring at the rain streaking the windows. There was a knock. He didn't answer. The door creaked anyway. Christina stepped in slowly, her hands clasped in front of her. "I didn't mean to cross a line," she said softly. He didn't look at her, just kept his eyes on the glass. "I know." She waited, hoping for more. But there was only silence. "They're kids," she said. "They ask questions because they want to understand, not to hurt anyone." Robert finally looked up. His eyes were tired, not just from today, from all of it. "It's not the question," he said. "It's the answer." Christina didn't move. He set the glass down, stood slowly, and faced her. "They trust you, more than anyone." She didn't deny it. "Because it was true. And that scares me," he said, "because trust means pain when it ends, and I don't know if I can watch them lose someone again." The words hung there, bare and vulnerable. Christina stepped closer. "Then don't let them lose me." That surprised him. He searched her face, not for lies, but for sincerity. "I'm not trained," she added. "I don't have degrees or certifications. I came to clean bathrooms and sweep floors. That's all I was trying to do." She hesitated. Then, more quietly, "But I see them, and I think maybe they see me too." Robert ran a hand over his face. The weight in his shoulders didn't lift, but something in him softened. "What would it take for you to stay?" Christina blinked, unsure if she heard him right. "Stay? As their nanny," he said. "Officially, full-time, with everything you need." Her eyes searched his. "Not for money, not for status. For meaning." "Why me?" Robert didn't hesitate. Because you're the only one who doesn't try to control them. You let them be, and somehow, they come back to you. That's not a job, she whispered. That's love. He nodded. Exactly. The room fell into stillness again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt like something was about to begin. Christina looked down, her fingers twisting slightly at the hem of her shirt. I can't promise miracles, she said. I'm not asking for miracles, he replied. Just stay. She didn't answer right away, but something in her eyes shifted. Hope. Soft, unspoken, real. The offer wasn't formal. There were no contracts, no meetings, no signatures. Just a quiet moment in a dim room, two people standing on either side of years they didn't know how to explain, and a single question. Just stay. And Christina did. She didn't move into a new title. She moved into their rhythm. She began the next morning the same way she had every day before tying her apron at sunrise, walking through the house in soft steps. But something had shifted. The boys met her at the kitchen before she called their names. One hugged her waist. Another held up a crayon drawing he had made of all five of them, standing on a patch of green, with a blue line in the sky that he said was a happy cloud. There was still chaos. One child spilled juice across the table. Another refused to eat unless his sandwich was cut into triangles, not squares. But Christina didn't scold. She adjusted. And slowly, so did the house. Robert noticed it first in the small things. Laughter in the hallways. Shoes piled at the front door instead of scattered down the steps. A child humming while brushing his teeth. And at night, silence again. But not the old kind. Not hollow or heavy. Just stillness. Peaceful. Warm. One evening, after dinner, Robert walked into the living room and found Christina and the boys curled up on the floor. Blankets. Storybooks. A bowl of apple slices between them. They looked up when he entered, not startled, not stiff. Just home. Come, sit, one of the boys said. He hesitated, then did. It was awkward at first. He wasn't used to sitting on floors anymore. His body had gotten used to boardrooms, not bedtime. But when one of the boys handed him a picture book and climbed into his lap without asking, something broke open. And it didn't hurt. It healed. That night, long after the boys were asleep, Robert lingered in the kitchen. Christina was there, wiping crumbs from the counter, humming to herself. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. They've changed, he said. She looked up. No, she replied. They've just started showing you who they are. He nodded slowly. And me? He asked. Have I changed? Christina gave a soft smile. You started coming home early. He chuckled under his breath. Is that all it takes? No, she said, but it's a start. They stood there for a moment, the hum of the dishwasher in the background. I never thought I could be this kind of father, he admitted. You don't have to be any kind, she answered gently. You just have to be theirs. The words landed heavy in his chest, not with guilt, but with grace. He looked at her, really looked. Not just at the woman who'd brought light into his house, but the woman who'd stayed, who had no reason to love 4 boys that weren't hers, who chose them anyway. That Friday, a storm rolled through town. The power flickered. Thunder cracked across the sky. At midnight, Robert heard footsteps, tiny ones. He stepped out of his room and found all 4 boys standing in the hallway in their pajamas, holding stuffed animals, eyes wide. Where were you going? He asked. The oldest pointed down the hall. Christina's room. He opened his mouth but stopped. And then he nodded. Okay, go ahead. He watched as they tiptoed away, barefoot and brave. And for the first time in 4 years, he didn't feel like he was losing something. He felt like he was getting it back. The trial week ended on a Sunday. No ceremony, no announcement. Just a quiet line on a clipboard Mrs. Alder held in her hand and a reminder spoken in passing. Her time is up. Christina heard it. She didn't argue, didn't ask for more time. She simply folded her clothes that evening and set her small bag by the door. Her heart was full, but her hands were still. She had come to clean. She had done more than that. And still, she wasn't sure if she belonged. In the boys' room, bedtime didn't feel right. No one laughed. No one asked for an extra story. One of them cried quietly into his pillow, even though no one had said anything yet. Somehow, they just knew. Christina kissed each of them goodnight. Her voice didn't shake, but her throat ached. She stood in the hallway for a long time afterward, waiting. Not for someone to stop her, just for the silence to feel bearable. In the kitchen, Robert stood by the sink. His tie was off, sleeves rolled up, but his eyes were distant. He hadn't said anything all day, not to her, not to the boys, not even to himself. Because some truths are harder to face than grief. He heard her footsteps behind him, soft, measured, like always. "I'll be gone before breakfast," she said gently. He turned to face her. She wasn't crying, but she looked tired. That kind of tired that doesn't come from work, it comes from giving your whole heart and not knowing if it's enough. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked. Robert swallowed. "Because I didn't want to make it harder. For them? For me." The words broke something open in both of them. "They've never trusted anyone like you," he said. "Not even me." "They want to," Christina replied. "They're just waiting for you to stop standing at the door." He looked at her then, really looked. And he saw it. Not just what she'd done, but what she'd become. She hadn't just filled a role. She had given them back their laughter, their rhythm, their softness. "You're not the maid," he said. Her eyes glistened. "I never tried to be." And in that silence, it became clear. She had come to clean a house, but she'd ended up healing a home. He took a step closer. "I don't want you to leave." She nodded slowly. "I know, but I don't just mean for the boys." Now she looked at him fully, deeply, like someone who understood that hearts don't ask for permission when they decide to stay. "You're allowed to feel again," she whispered. "It doesn't dishonor what you lost." His voice was rough, but steady. "I thought feeling again meant forgetting her." "No," Christina said softly. "It means remembering that love still lives here." From down the hallway, the sound of little footsteps padded toward them. All four boys, sleepy-eyed and barefoot, stood in the doorway. One of them clutched a drawing 5 stick figures, and one in the middle holding their hands. "Don't go," the smallest one said. Robert looked down at them, then back at her. "Stay," he said again. "Not as help, not as hired." "Then what am I?" she asked. He didn't rush the answer. "You're home." Christina knelt down as the boys ran to her, wrapping their arms around her sides, her neck, her waist. And this time, she let herself cry. Not from sadness, but from the kind of peace that only comes when you finally landed where your heart was always meant to be. The house that once echoed with silence now breathed with life again, not because everything was perfect, but because love had finally stayed.